At InDigital, we know that public safety professionals hold themselves to a high standard. In fact, standard doesn't do it justice. In over 25 years working alongside you, carrying millions of calls over our IP networks, your dedication has inspired us. That's why our ESI Net goes beyond industry standards, not only I3 compliant, but designed to adapt to future development for a network you can count on when it matters most. Learn more at indigital.net.
Here in Greenville County, we have 8 different places where a 911 call can be answered.
It is the largest county in South Carolina. It's a challenge.
The type of information that a telecommunicator gets from Radius Plus is location-based technology. You can see where the caller is, if they have a medical issue, if they speak a different language. They're immediately able to text to that caller in their native language. It reduces response times because it immediately gets first responders where they need to be.
Carbine, it's multimedia. You can get text, translate to whatever language, getting away with the legacy equipment and going into a cloud-based solution.
It's the first time in U.S. history that we have an EZNet through cloud-native call handling.
As a police officer, to have the victim go video, that's unheard of.
You're getting upgrades every month, not every year.
To schedule your free Carbine demo, please visit carbine.com/WTT.
If Within the Trenches has ever taught you something, open your eyes to what it is like to be a 911 dispatcher, or has inspired you to become one, then help support us and join our Patreon. Get exclusive bonus content, one-of-a-kind swag, discounts on merchandise, ad-free early access to new episodes, and much more. To join, please visit patreon.com/WTT podcast. And if you're an industry partner, we have something for you as well. And now, for the show.
This is Jordan, and you're listening to the Code 7 Podcast Network.
Warning. This episode contains the 3 A's of podcasting: adult content, adult language, and awesomeness. You've been warned.
Welcome to Within the Trenches, true stories from the 911 dispatchers who live them.
Hey, what's going on? This is Ricardo of the Code 7 Podcast Network, and this is Within the Trenches, true stories from the 911 dispatchers who live them. This episode is sponsored by InDigital Rapid Deploy as well as Carbine, and a big shout out to patrons as always. Thank you so much for everything. We've got audio versions of the DRT as well as open mic going out to patrons only as of right now, and bonus content coming as well. So if you want to be a patron, make sure to stay tuned. At the end, I'll have all that information there. But thank you as always for the support. And there's a lot of stuff going on, man. It's already July 18th. I feel like it was just yesterday that I said it was July 1st or whatever day it was. Man, it is going by fast. It's always the way. But along with all that, a lot of good things happening as well. We've got some national conferences that are coming up. We've got National APCO, and then a lot of virtual events, but also a lot of fall conferences that are coming up as well. State conferences, a lot of them that I'm going to be at, whether I'm speaking or doing the podcast there and recording different episodes with attendees. Either way, a lot of good stuff that's going on, and I'm excited. Very much excited. Also, Dare to Be Great 4. Dare to Be Great is back, and it'll be the first full week of December. It'll be December, I think it's 5th through the 8th that this will be going on, and I am super excited to be bringing it back. There's a lot of people who were asking for me to reconsider doing Dare to Be Great because, you know, not a lot of people get to go to conferences, whether it's state or national, and, they want to be able to get this training as well. So, Dare to Be Great is back. And I'm excited for that as well. I've got some excellent keynote speakers and a bunch of people who have been submitting their sessions for presentations. So please make sure to submit yours as well. I've got all the information on withinthetrenches.net, so make sure to check that out. And there's more to come on that. But I am excited for today's episode, for my guest. There's a lot that this person has got going on, and we are going to learn about it today. So I am very excited. My guest today is Toby, and he's a communications officer at NRV 911. Hey,
Hey,
what's going on?
nothing much. I'm so happy to be here.
Good, man. I'm glad to have you here. Now, I had one of your coworkers on who I believe is also the person who is helping you start, doing this project that you're doing, the Tenacious Telecommunicator, and she gave me the name of your center. And if I remember correctly, it's a pretty long one.
It is a very long one.
What is it?
It's the New River Valley Emergency Communications Regional Authority.
There it is. I can't for the life of me remember if I ended up saying it or if I just said NRV 911 and I asked her to say it just like I asked you. But either way, I remember in the beginning I was telling her, I said, I'm gonna bite my tongue while I'm saying it. I don't think I'm gonna be able to get it all the way out. And she said it. She's like, it's a mouthful. I was like, that it is. That it is.
It's definitely a mouthful.
Yes. Well, I am very, very happy to have you here and to learn more about you as well as Tenacious Telecommunicator and everything that's going on with that. But just to start out, let's go back in time, just a few years ago. How did you get started in public safety to begin with? Do you come from a public safety background, like a family and everything? Folks that are in different lines of public safety, or did you just jump in green?
So I jumped in green.
Mm-hmm.
I started when I was 16. I started volunteering with the local EMS agency, Christiansburg Rescue. So I started that through high school. I did that for several years, and then I moved up into various other leadership positions there, then moved to state leadership positions through the Virginia Association of Volunteer Rescue Squads. And then I started part-time with the Virginia Tech Police Department as a security center representative. And then a couple years went by, and then I finally took on a job here at NRV 911 as a part-time telecommunicator. And then finally, I took a full-time job here.
Oh, man. So, okay, let's back up a little bit. So starting at 16, what were some of the things that you were hearing? Because I've spoken to a lot of people, and some of them had started even from when they were like little kids. And one of the people specifically, they were telling me that it was way back in the day when so their dad was the chief of police, but they were running everything out of their house, and he remembered like even doing traffic from the radio in their house and stuff. And so they had all of this experience going on, which, led them to do what they're doing today. But for you, at 16, I'm trying to think, for me at 16, I was working I think it was working at like a pizza place or something. And then, of course, going to school and everything. But to be doing what you were doing and possibly seeing or hearing certain things, I mean, what was that like for you?
So kind of first off, it was a little bit overwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like not every 16-year-old kind of gets those experiences, but it's also super rewarding. I got to be in my community and give back to my community as a volunteer. So it was just so rewarding to be able to do all those things. But it was also kind of a culture shock because at 16, you really don't know how the world works. You have an idea of what you think happens in the world, but you really don't get to see like the actual raw part of the world and see all the things that are happening and how the systems work and things like that.
Yeah, I could see how that would be mind-blowing, right? Because especially now, you see it where you're taking these phone calls, right? It might be just for example, just a specific incident, right? And you know exactly how it went down. But then you see it in the news and it might be a little different, right? And you're sitting there thinking, that's not exactly how it happened. So as a 16-year-old, you would I'm thinking about when I was 16 and I would see stuff in the news and think, oh man, that's pretty crazy. But there's that added layer of actually knowing and seeing and having, like, as you said, that raw view of, wow, this is completely different. So for sure, mind blown.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you continue to move on, right? And you're building all of this stuff. So you've got all of this different experience and everything else. And then you finally get into dispatch and all. Did you have a chance to do like a sit along or anything? And I ask also because you've got all that time in between, right? That you started doing this from 16 all the way up to where you were in dispatch. Was there ever any time that you got to do a sit along in dispatch, or was it really just hearing like radio traffic?
So it was really just hearing radio traffic. We would come up and visit the telecommunicators on the floor when we
Mhm.
were be on duty, and like bring them like snacks or cookies or something like that, just to show our appreciation. But I never really got a full experience. Um, One of our admin staff, Derek, he actually started EMS the same time that I did at Christiansburg Rescue.
Mhm.
He came from North Carolina, and we started the same time at Christiansburg Rescue together. We were in the same orientation class. So, kind of seeing that, it kind of piqued my interest back then. And I was like, oh, that's a really cool job. That seems very interesting. But I never really pursued anything, really did anything to it till 3 years ago.
So I could see that you were immediately one of the favorites coming in because you're bringing in snacks. We love snacks. And so you already have an in right there. So you know you're going in there, and if you can think back really quick, so you're going in and dropping certain things off or visiting everyone there. What was that like walking in and seeing everything? Now you had already said, it seems like a cool job and stuff, but do you remember seeing like all the screens and everything? A lot of people always say, it looked like I was at NASA or something. There's all these computers and everyone is doing all these different things. It's pretty crazy. But what was it like for you? Do you remember?
So I remember kind of walking in and being like, "Oh, there's all these computers, there's all these lights, there's all these people, and then like this person's doing one thing, and then this person's doing another, and it's just working." And I'm like, "How is all this like functioning all together? This just seems like kind of like controlled chaos. Like
Yeah.
somehow it's working because like." And then you hear all the radio traffic and see like actually all the things that they're processing and be like, "How does one person handle all these things like from one just department on top of all the added other departments that other people are working?" So it was just kind of mind blowing again to see how the system actually worked and how it got from the caller into the field.
It's you describing that. You bring me back to my first day walking into the central dispatch. So when I started out dispatching, it was 2001, and it was in Central Florida, small police department, very small city and stuff. And the call volume wasn't that high. And when I ended up moving back home to Southwest Michigan, finished off my dispatching career in the center, Allegan County, which is the county that I grew up in. It was completely different. So the way you're describing it, it was like me walking in there as well, because there's all these screens. I think there was four people. There was five consoles there, but there was four people because it was on the weekend when I started out, and it was a midnight shift. And I walk in, and I'm like, oh, okay, this is completely different from the small police department. And it looked like the person was moving like an octopus, man. Like you've got all these different arms doing all these different things, but really it's only the two arms, and they're just typing like crazy, yelling stuff over, eating at the same time, or trying to, and doing everything else. And I remember thinking, am I going to be able to do this? Like, I don't know. Like these guys they're kicking ass and taking names. So I definitely feel you there, how it was right in the beginning. But then now let's fast forward to getting into dispatch. Uh, let's even start with the hiring process. What was that like for you? Like what types of tests did they have you doing? Because for me, there were a bunch of different ones. The central dispatch that I ended up going to, they had one written test, but I was trying to get into two different central dispatches at the same time, and then whoever said yes first is where I was going to go. But one of them, like one of the tests that they had us do, was listening to radio traffic. So you had to write down what you thought the officer in dispatch was what they were talking about, and that's how they narrowed it down from like 30 to only 10 people. So what kind of test did they have for you?
So I'm actually very unique in that regard. So I got to kind of bypass the normal hiring process because at the time, our interim executive director, um, they were hurting staffing wise, and he had reached out to the departments that we serve that had like people who were handling our NCIC entries and things like that. And that's what I did at the Virginia Tech Police Department. And he asked if we'd be willing to come over to the 911 center and work part-time and assist in those regards. So I actually got to bypass some of those things because the departments that we worked for had to do those similar things in order to get hired there. So they just waived those things and took those, the background, the psych exam, and all those testing aspects, and just push them over to the 911 center. So
sweet. So you had a copy and paste from one place to the other.
That's right. That's right.
That's pretty awesome, because some of those tests that I hear about are pretty gnarly, and that's good that you got to go through that. So you started out as part-time at first, and you're going back and forth. What was the training like then in the beginning?
So Valerie was actually my trainer. She was on your podcast.
Oh yeah.
Back.
Yes.
She's our training coordinator for our agency. She was actually my first trainer. So initially, since I was part-time, I would come in Monday through Friday with Valerie's schedule, and kind of do spurts of training through that way, because that worked best with my schedule and her schedule, and we worked it out that way. And then, so that's just kind of the training process. And then I started out only doing dispatching. I wasn't actually call taking at the time because part-time people, they didn't want to put through EMD and all that stuff. So we started out just doing dispatching.
Damn. So, okay. So how is that for you right off the bat? Because, I mean, I guess in a way, you had the radio traffic and everything down. So you already had that developed in your ear, right? And that's one thing, a lot of people sometimes that I've spoken to, they would say, that was probably one of the hardest things, was trying to get not just the lingo, but just like really listening, because you've got officers who and I have friends that listen to this too, and they know that I'm going to be talking about them. I'm just not going to say your name. But they would sometimes sound like they're in their microphone, like eating the microphone and stuff, and I would be able to understand what it was that they're saying, and some of the newer folks would be like, how did you know that? I'm like, I understand caveman mumble. and but sometimes it would be hard, and also when you're not doing stuff on phones right away first, sometimes it's hard to transition going from one to the other, or vice versa. So one of the hardest things for me, and this is going to sound stupid, but one of the hardest things for me was kind of breaking a little bit from my trainer when I was on radios. And what I mean by that is trying to figure out exactly what to say, because I wanted to do so well, and I wanted to please the trainer as well, that sometimes the response would be as simple as saying 10-4. However, I would second guess myself, and I would look and say, it's just a 10-4, right? Right? And they'd go, yeah, just say 10-4. And I would say, okay, I just want to make sure I'm doing it right. Like, I don't want to mess up. And they would say, look, you're going to mess up. And if you mess up, not only am I going to tell you, the rest of the room is going to tell you, but everyone on the road is going to tell you as well. So get over it, get over yourself, get out of your head, and just do it. So for you, starting out on radios, what was that like?
So, I mean, I was probably the most exciting thing that I was excited for to come to the 911 center was call taking. Because I wanted to actually have that connection with the community and talk to the community, because that's what I really liked in rescue. I liked kind of hearing the community's story and hearing all about that. So that was kind of a bummer to start out on radios, but I was glad that I got to see it kind of in a different experience and got to really connect with responders on a different way. And kind of, it was, again, kind of a shock, because I was so used to hearing radio traffic kind of in the distance. It was like I had my portable on my hip, or it was in the truck radio and I was listening with it being broadcasted on like a speaker. And then to actually have it like in my ear was a very different experience. I kind of was like, you kind of feel a different connection. Like you're responsible for those people because they're like right here in your head, like in your ear. So it was just a very different experience, but an awesome experience at the same time.
Now, with what you just said, that also adds a huge pressure factor there too, right? And I mean, you hit it right on the nail by saying that in those watching and listening to this as well, that's how much stress is that can be put on you because yeah, that's that connection. You are responsible for that person. If they say something and you don't hear it, oof, sometimes it could be bad, right? You know, of course there's a playback, but you can't always um depend on that playback because it might not get captured as to what it was that they said, and that can go from 0 to 100 to just like that, and it gets pretty crazy, right? So especially at a young age and stuff, you've got all of this responsibility and you're like, oh geez, I just want to do a good job. was there was there anything while you were on radios that you felt, I guess, was surprising? Was there anything actually that surprised you when you first started out?
So the thing that really surprised me was coming from the field. I was like, why can't they answer the radio all the time? Like why does it take them like a second, or why is there a lag in the radio? And I'm like, what could they be doing?
Yeah.
And then I'm like, oh my gosh, like these are all the things that they could be doing. And I wish these people would stop calling me 20 different times. I'm trying to answer them when I'm trying to do this and do this. And it's just like, oh my gosh. So like they would key up on the radio, and then if I didn't answer them in like a second, they were like, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
An RV. And I'm like, literally give me 2 seconds. I'm literally typing this into the call and then I'm going to answer you. You gave me a second to answer you. So kind of having that appreciation for dispatch in a different way. I mean, I always was like, oh, dispatch is awesome. They do all these great things for us. And anytime we ask for them, they can get us all these resources. And I think also seeing all the things that they actually did behind the scenes that we didn't even know about in the field. Because every training we went to, like whether it was mass casualty incident training or active shooter training or whatever we did for EMS, they were always like, well, tell dispatch and they know what to do. Tell dispatch and they know what to do. Tell dispatch and they know what to do. And that always shocked me. I was like, okay, like, so these people are like the lifeline to everything. And then coming in and actually doing those things and seeing those things, I was like, wow, we do really have lots of resources at our fingertips. Maybe not always all the resources that people think we have, but we do have lots of resources that we can tap into.
It's definitely eye-opening, yes, when people say that. And a lot of times, so something that we did in dispatch, or something that we would tell those out in the field, because they would say, how do you guys do this? How are you doing this? Or, how do you just make it happen? And we would say it's FM is what it is. And they would say, what does that mean? And we would say it's F and magic. That's how we do it. Like we just do it. and it was always fun. Like, we would have officers come in sometimes. One time that I remember specifically, it was a very bad storm that was going on. Wires, trees down everywhere. And there's only 3 of us in there for the entire county. And we are just working our asses off. And there was a deputy that worked in our section. And one of the city officers who came up, who was married to one of my coworkers, and they were in there maybe an hour and they were done. They had no idea still how we were doing what we were doing, and being able to keep up, just the 3 of us, not only dealing with these incidents, but all the other incidents that are coming in, because 911 doesn't stop. And all they were doing was calling the road commission and giving them like the locations of the trees and wires down and everything. And they're like, all right, we're ready to go out to the road. Do you guys need anything else? We're like, I didn't know you were doing anything to begin with. But yeah, there's a lot of people that don't know. And when I first started doing the podcast and everything, there was this hard ass deputy who I'm still really good friends with. And we would tell them, so for NCIC and the local everything, what we were running in Michigan, we call it lean, and every state I believe has a different name for theirs. But if they called us on the main radio, we would say, go to lean and stand by, go to lean and stand by, especially when it's going crazy in there. And they thought that we would just send them over there because we really didn't want to deal with them, or we were just waiting or whatever. Kind of like you were saying, I didn't realize this is all the stuff that was going on. How come they're not answering the radio, or, whatever. And just in the first couple episodes, he sent me a message and he goes, man, I learned more about dispatch in these first few episodes than I have ever known in the 20 years that I've been doing this. Keep doing what you're doing. And now I know that when you send me to lean to stand by, you're not just shitting me. There's other stuff that you're doing.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, man, there's a lot of different things that are going on during that time. What about phones? So phones is something that you really wanted to do. You started out on radios, of course, dispatching and such, and then you finally get a chance to move over to phones. How was that for you in the beginning?
It was very stressful. I felt kind of a stress every time the phone would ring. I would be like, what is this going to be? I really didn't know what to expect. Because, like, of course, all these shows and TVs, they're like, this person got murdered and there's a 200 passenger bus that's about to hang off a cliff and it's about to be on fire and there's a dinosaur about to eat it.
Right. Yeah.
So I really didn't know what to expect initially. Like, being in dispatch, obviously I knew a little bit more about what was going on, but I still had never really like gotten that personal experience. And these people that I work with had been doing it for a while. So I was like, wow, like, these people know what they're doing and they're able to quickly process, kind of just move on. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this. So it was kind of a shock to take some of my first calls and them not be the 200 passenger bus with a dinosaur hanging off a cliff about to catch on fire.
Yeah.
So that was kind of a shock to me too.
Because there's a lot of calls that come in on 911 specifically that are not 911 type calls. There's people who end up calling in and this was something that, friends and family would always say, are you being for real? And I would say, yes, people call in on 911 to ask me for parade times, Halloween trick-or-treating times. If road conditions are whatever they are, and they would go, why do people do that? I'm like, I don't know. But they do, and we're there. So if we have the chance to answer, we go ahead and answer. Otherwise, we say Google it or something. Like, there's other things that can be done. So when you start out in taking calls and all this other stuff that's going on, and actually we can even go back to when you first really got in there into dispatch. Were you ever told, these are some of the types of calls you're going to take? Self-care is a big thing, because I know when I started out, it was pretty taboo, and I wasn't told this is some of the hard shit you're going to deal with. You need to kind of figure out how to help yourself. How was that like for you?
So luckily I had Valerie as my trainer. So she's very much about self-care, affirmations, and just being very positive and kind of just take care of yourself first, because if you don't take care of yourself, you can't help others. So I was lucky enough to have Valerie as my trainer to kind of help with that self-care aspect of things. So it was really nice to have that aspect and that mentality, because I know a lot of people in 911 are still kind of those hard asses about like, if you can't handle it, get out, which is not a positive mindset to have. So I was lucky enough to have a trainer that was very big on those type things.
See, and that's really good, because also even when I ended up coming into the central dispatch that I was working at, there wasn't a lot of talk about it either. When I was there, everything that I do now actually started out because I really didn't have anyone to talk to. We didn't talk about our hard calls or anything. It was, again, like I said, it was kind of taboo. It was something that no one wanted to look like the weaker person. That oh, you're asking for help. Maybe it's because you can't handle this or whatever. So I would bury those calls, and it started affecting me. Like, it was not good. It was not a good thing. So I ended up hitting burnout as well, ended up going back to school, and a lot of the projects that I was doing had to do with dispatch. And it was therapeutic for me to be able to share my stories. So I continued doing it that way, and I noticed that a lot more people started talking about it, which is so good that it's a lot of it has changed. We've come so far with uh, this topic specifically with mental health and wellness, and it's awesome to see a lot of younger folks, the new generation that's coming in and pushing it even more, and getting it out there in front of everyone, just like you are doing and a lot of others are doing as well. And that's why conversations like this are so good, so that people can just continue to learn. And so when they call 911 and they're put on hold, they realize, well, they're not putting me on hold just because they don't want to help me. It's because that emergency is not the only emergency. There's always another emergency that is going on. So when you when you started getting into taking more phone calls and more phone calls, um, what was some of the things that you were seeing? Some of the things that. How about we start this out the same way as the dispatching part of this with the phone calls? Was there anything that surprised you, or that was, I guess, in general, overwhelming at all?
I think the thing that kind of shocked me the most is the absolute like need in the community, because they didn't really understand how the system worked,
Hmm.
and they didn't really have any other people to call or any other resource to call. So 911 was their outlet, because they didn't have any family to take care of them. They didn't have any person that they could go to ask what time the parade starts. They didn't know how a computer worked, to look it up. So you kind of were the community's lifeline as well, because some of the people in the community don't have access to the resources that I guess we kind of expect them to.
Right.
So we kind of are the catch all, because we're always here. We're here 24/7, 365, and we're always going to answer the phone. You aren't going to go to voicemail or anything like that. Like some of these other businesses, like you call a doctor's office and you have a recording answer, and then you press a button, and then you wait and wait and wait, and then all of a sudden you have a voicemail and you're like, I need help now. So we're here all the time, and people just need us as a lifeline, whether that's asking what time the parade starts, if the road is broken, or they're having an emergency, like medical emergency or something like that.
So because phone calls, dealing with the public and everything, was one of the big things that you really wanted to get into. How did it feel after those first handful of calls that you've taken? How was that for you? Was it satisfying? Like, was it what you were thinking it was going to be when you started taking these calls?
So I think it was actually very satisfying. I love
Hmm.
helping other people and just being able to help the community. And I know a lot of people get frustrated when people call about parades or whatever. But again, we're that lifeline, and these people don't have other resources. So also, if you don't provide them the information and then send them somewhere else, they're more likely to call you back with that same issue 5 minutes later because they couldn't find the information. So if you're nice to that person, show them respect, and be able to provide them that information, they'll be able to more quickly adapt to that and move on. And if something were to happen in the future where they actually needed police, fire, medical response, or they witnessed a crime or something like that, they'd be more likely to call because you were nice to them during a situation where those resources weren't needed, but they still needed information.
I think that's something that's really important for people to remember, that it's all in your response, right? It's all in your response, especially if somebody is calling for the very first time. And if you have just a little change in your tone, that could affect that could impact the entire call, which is the craziest thing. But it makes sense, because it's the same thing if, let's say, you're walking into the dispatch center and you are in the best mood ever, and you say hello to one of your coworkers and they're like, hey, and that's it, and you're like, oh shit, okay. And it kind of changes, right? It doesn't fully change your mood, but not to go there.
Yeah, absolutely.
But
Absolutely.
it could change the room. I remember a supervisor meeting that I had, and I remember one of my coworkers saying, "You can't affect my mood or anything like that." And I gave them that scenario, and I said, "Man, if I come in and I'm like, let's do this. We're going to take on the world. We're going to take these calls, and we're going to help people. You're going to feel good." Especially if you're, kind of down and it's like a motivational speech. You're like, hell yeah, yeah, let's do this. I want to do that too. But if I come in and I'm being a complete dick, it's gonna rub off on you, and you're gonna be like, okay, well, and then other things start coming up, and then they're just festering, and then the whole room is crappy. But the thing that I can say is, even if the room is crappy, and this is what some of the experience that I've had, is that when it comes down to the phone calls and work itself, no matter what is going on, because sometimes we can be kind of like a dysfunctional siblings, right? Family sometimes. Either way, when the shit hits the fan, it's like a well-oiled machine, just working, just going in. I think that's one of the things that I love the most, but it's definitely an interesting job. It is definitely an interesting job. Now, do you remember your first call or some of your earlier calls that came in?
I don't remember my first call. I do remember a call while I was on training that um, was very kind of impactful. It was kind of my first, like, oh my gosh, this is a TV type call. Um, I had somebody call in and say that they witnessed an abduction. And so I was going through the call, processing the call, and my coworkers said that they've gotten similar calls like this. So it could either be very true, or it could just be somebody misreading the situation. So obviously, we treated it as if it was true. We dispatched units, and then we contacted another jurisdiction because it was kind of on the line of our jurisdictions. So we contacted another jurisdiction, and they started sending units as well. And then we kind of processed through the call. I asked all the questions, and then I hung up the phone and was like, well, I wonder what's going to happen. And then probably 10 minutes later, I get another call with somebody like panting on the phone. And I was like, what is happening? And then this woman was like, oh my gosh, I've been abducted. I was able to get away. I'm now at this person's house. And so we were kind of going through, I was originally talking to a witness, and then I actually got to talk to the person who'd been abducted. And we were kind of going through that whole process. And then the person kind of showed up at the house, and she was like, hey, he's here. And then we had to kind of get quiet and get silent on the line for a little bit. And then you kind of heard some ruckus going on in the background. And then the next thing you know, you're trying to get in contact with the caller to make sure they're okay. And then you hear a vehicle start, and then another person who's randomly there, this little old lady just came up on the phone and was like, yeah, the man came and drugged him off. We drugged her off by her hair. And I'm like, oh, okay. Like, just calmly. And I was like, okay, well. And then you could hear sirens in the background starting. And then luckily enough, PD was able to get on scene, and before he actually was able to take her again. But that was a pretty impactful call for me.
Oh man. So this was a legit, it was a legit call. And the reason I ask is because, like, there's a lot of times, phone calls that come in that seem like it's something like that's going on. And then it turns out that the person they were just doing voices, and it was just something that they were doing for attention. But so this was legit then. Okay.
Yeah.
So as you're taking this, so you got the initial call, right? But then you end up speaking to the person who'd been abducted. Where are you at that moment? Like heart wise. I mean, the adrenaline has got to be going, because now you're like, oh, geez, I've got the actual person on the line here, and there is so much that is going into that. What was that like?
So in the moment, I was kind of like just focusing on, like, here's the questions you have to ask. You need to get units on the way and get all the appropriate information and get like all these things kind of working through. So I was able to kind of just get through the call, and then kind of after the call, and I was like, what did I just do? Like how did I get through that like so like without being like affected like emotionally. And
Mm-hmm.
then I kind of started thinking about all the emotions, and it kind of like was like, wow, this is like a very highly stress filled job. And if units wouldn't have been in the place to get the suspect, then that could have turned very different. And again, my voice could have been across the news talking about this type of abduction and just kind of the impact that telecommunicators have on the whole public safety system and just public safety in general. So it was a big thing.
Oh man. Yeah, so calls like that, you're going through all of that and stuff, and then was there debriefing or anything after that?
Me and my trainer kind of had a talk in the supervisor's office to go over um, all those type things since it was a critical call. So we kind of did a one-on-one debriefing with my supervisor. So
That's good. That's good because a lot of times debriefing doesn't happen, and if it
yeah,
does, and I think it's a lot different now, but before, like when I was in dispatch, I think I was maybe in one or two debriefings on certain incidents. Otherwise, everyone else was like, "Well, why do we need to bring in dispatch? They weren't out there," and we would say, we were there. We add a whole new layer to this. So why don't you bring us in and you'll find out, which is what they started doing. And they've had dispatch a part of it ever since. Now, of course, I'm speaking for my own dispatch center and all, but man, so, and also to have that while you're in training.
yeah, absolutely. I was like, oh my gosh.
I can just imagine, man.
Yeah. So that one was probably my like TV call that really kind of was like, wow, that kind of really made me have the realization that like this is the impact that you can have.
Mhm.
And it's critical that you get the correct information and all those things because it's so important to uh, the responders and public safety as a whole in the community. But then I had another call when I was off training. It was probably several months ago that really wasn't that TV call. It wasn't like probably wouldn't have affected most people the way it affected me.
Mhm.
Um, but I had a lady call and she was talking about her husband that was super violent and needed to go to the hospital because he had Parkinson's disease. And so she was going through some of like the things that was happening with her, and she was crying and she said, I don't really know where to go next. And that really affected me because my grandpa has Parkinson's, and I just a couple months before I took that call, I saw my mom kind of going through those same similar situations. So it really affected me on the call when I was taking it. And those are the type of calls that you don't necessarily think that are going to affect you. But there was really no like, once we sent the deputies out there and EMS out there, there was really no closure. And I really wanted the closure that I never really got. I really wanted to like take her phone number down into my cell phone and call her after work and be like, what happened? But
Yeah.
obviously I couldn't do that. So not having that closure really affected me, and especially like seeing that personal connection um, from the experience my mom had with my grandpa to kind of using that experience to kind of help this lady through the call was very probably that was probably my most impactful call that's affected me the most.
I'm a firm believer that our life experiences definitely help us out, especially in this profession. And it could be in any profession, really. But this one specifically, because, and I also say this to folks that I feel like some of the phone calls that we end up taking were meant for us because we have that experience. Somehow, some way, those calls end up coming in and it was meant for us to take it. You had that experience, right? And you were able to speak to this person and speak to that experience as well, where a coworker of yours might not have been able to help them as well as you. They still would have been able to help them, but they might not have been as understanding or had, any advice or anything else because they don't have that experience that you have. And it's it's interesting how some of these calls come in, and afterwards you sit there and you reflect and you think, damn, that had to have been meant for me because I have that experience. I don't know how you feel, but I feel like some of those calls, especially this one that you just said, I mean, you had that experience and you were able to help that person better than anybody else would have been able to, simply because you had that experience.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that definitely kind of things fall in line like they're supposed to. Uh, so I was glad that I kind of got to experience that call because it definitely impacted me in my career, um, and it was just a very eye-opening experience. And I think that a lot of people expect kind of those big kind of TV type calls to be the
Mhm.
ones that really affect the telecommunicators and the responders, but sometimes it's just those calls that really connect with your personal story that really calls have the biggest impact.
Yeah, I agree. And you've been doing this for just over 3 years now. And would you say that that call, or maybe a different call, is really one that kind of solidified that you are where you're supposed to be? And I ask people all the time, was it a certain call, or was there a certain incident, or was it just being in there and listening to being in that environment that let you know this is where I'm supposed to be. This is what I'm supposed to do. Have you had that moment? Like, has it happened?
So I think really kind of coming in and then finding that my coworkers and I really have a good connection and we're all working towards a good purpose. I
Mhm.
think that's really, and me being able to kind of make some type of impact really kind of started to lay the foundation. And then as I was taking calls and helping all these people, it really kind of kept layering on top of that. But I think kind of that one call that I described was
Mhm.
probably the one that I was like, "Yep, we've built that strong foundation, and I'm where I need to be." So I want to get more invested and kind of see what bigger impacts I can make on not the 911 industry.
It's amazing. And it's also a good segue into the Tenacious Telecommunicator. Tell me about this, how it came to be, and I guess where do you see it going?
So I had kind of been so I never really I'm really bad about it actually. I never really like dip my toes in. I fully like to jump into things. And I'm very energetic and I like to stay busy doing things. So when I first started at 911, I always knew that I wanted to do more, but I wanted to focus on training and building that strong foundation so I would have something to go on after and build my career on. So I really focused on training and getting that stuff established. And then once I was out of training, I kind of started looking for avenues where I could help. And it wasn't really until I went to the Virginia conference in Roanoke that I really kind of had that like, oh, like I can really make an impact and do something different. So I had gone to the conference. I attended a session with Sarah Weston and Halcyon Frank, and we were kind of going through the session. And kind of the first activity was, hey, we're going to introduce ourselves. So think up an adjective that starts with the same letter as your first name to describe you as a person. So I was really having a problem with that. I was like, I have no idea. Like, I don't really know what adjective describes me. And then I was sitting next to Valerie, and Valerie's like, tenacious. Tenacious is the word that describes you. So for that exercise, I was tenacious Toby. And then we kind of, uh, we had lunch with Sarah and Halcyon, and then we kind of started talking and building that connection. And then I went back to the 911 center and started like, hey, like I can actually really make an impact. I can train and I can do all these things. I can start making sessions and things like that. So I started looking at avenues that I could do that. And then initially I applied to speak at the live in-person Denise Amberly Foundation conference that was supposed to be in South Carolina, in Myrtle Beach. And then ultimately it got canceled. But I was on the path to start teaching and training there. And then once that got canceled, I was kind of like, well, I still want to make my impact. So I started looking at other opportunities, and then finally I started reaching out. And then I made this group called the Tenacious Telecommunicator based on that class that I took with Sarah and Halcyon. And it kind of has just grown from there. It started out as a Facebook group, and then now we have a website. We have an award. I'm kind of teaching various classes at different conferences across the country. In the future, I've been talking with Sarah, and she's been giving me some pointers on where I could possibly move next. So we're just exploring different options, and I'm working through some different processes to see where we can go next.
Man, that is awesome. And how has it been for you going to, different, places to teach and do everything that you're doing and kind of spreading the word on this project that you have going on?
Oh, it's been absolutely amazing. I've met so many amazing people in the 911 industry. And kind of, it's probably my favorite part about going to conferences, though, is seeing the award ceremonies and listening to all the award winners and their impact they made on their communities and all the difference that they made at their center. I know that so originally when I went to the West Virginia conference, that was the first live in-person conference that I went to. That was kind of my first exposure to that type of event. And then after that, I always bring tissues to all those events because I end up crying because of the major impacts that our telecommunicators are making across the country. So,
see that right there, that's a genuine heart. That is awesome, because I'm the same way. if I hear a story or whatever, and I'm kind of sitting there, I'm like, I'm not crying, you're crying, type thing. But it's awesome because we all come from different places, right? We all have our unique stories. However, we're doing a job that is so impactful, and we have each other. We're like a huge family, this thin gold line. And when you hear about others who are doing the same thing that you are, not only do you understand where they're coming from, but you fully feel those emotions with whatever type of call it was or the award that they're getting and everything. So it's awesome that you guys have an award as well, that is going out now. Is that like an annual thing? Is it monthly? How does the award work?
So we just started it, so it's going to be an annual thing to start out. Maybe once it gets more traction, we might expand it out more. But right now, it's just annual, and so you go online to our website, tenacioustelecommunicator.com, and you can go under the services tab, and there's information about the award. And it really focuses on the people that are exhibiting our core values of the Tenacious Telecommunicator that me and the other team members that are kind of helping launch the project have come up with as our main core values that we want to focus on. So, nice. And I have a great group of people kind of reviewing the awards. I've kind of kept myself out of it because I want other people to have an impact, and I want that diverse population of people to kind of review those applications, because we all do come from different backgrounds and experience. So I wanted to have an unbiased and diverse group of people to review those things.
See, and I chuckle a little bit when you say that you left yourself out, because since 2016, I think 2022 has been the only year that I have not done it. But I had a Within the Trenches continuing education scholarship that I was doing every year. And like one would be for Nina, then the next one would be for the IAD, for Navigator, and then APCO, and then I would continue cycling them through. Because one of the things that I've always wanted to do since I had left dispatch was to be able to give back somehow, was to continue giving back and evolve. And I did the same thing when it came to the voting process. I would get a committee together, and they would say, "Are you going to be the the tiebreaker vote?" And I would say, "No, I'm not, because I want to send everyone." Like,
Yeah, that's the yeah.
I want to choose everyone and have them all go and everything. And I know it can't be like that. So that's why I have all of you to do it. So I relate with you there, because man, I want to send everyone, and I just wait till the end until they tell me who it is that ended up being the recipient.
Yeah, exactly. Because I would be like, oh my God. Like literally, so I receive the nominations and then I send them out to the committee, just because that's, I guess, the best way the process works right now. So I get the emails that they filled out the form, and then I just send those responses to the committee. But I'll just like briefly read through them, and I was like, oh my gosh, this person deserves it so much. And then I'll read the next one and I'll be like, oh my gosh, this person's so amazing. Yeah. So it's kind of like I'm glad I'm out of the process, because like I have no personal vested thing in it. Like I don't want somebody to be like, well, you just like this person more. So
Right. Yeah.
yeah. So I've kind of kept myself out, because number one, I would be like, everybody gets it and just find somehow to make it work. Or I would be like, or somebody might be like, you just like this person more. So I'm trying to be very neutral in that way.
Nice. Now, looking at some of the notes that I have here, you're on an APCO committee, right? Which one was that again?
I'm on the APCO Young Professionals Committee.
So for that committee, how important to you is it for to be doing a lot more for those younger professionals that are coming up? And the reason I ask that is because I feel like a lot of us who have been doing this for a while, that's one of the things that we should be doing. There should be more for that generation that's coming in to help kind of mold, a little bit, and teach and train. Because one of the biggest things that I've always wanted to do for myself is to leave this profession in a better place than when I found it. When I got into it, there was a lot of shit that was going on, a lot of shit that seemed like, you know, was not getting out there. It was more um, the seasoned or untouchables, that were running a lot of things, but also in their own way. And a lot of us had to kind of go rogue in a sense to get a lot more, I guess, recognition, but not so much recognition, but more so like the stories, getting them out there, but also wanting to keep these folks that are coming in, because a lot of times, and also when I was coming up, was they didn't really portray it as a career, right? It wasn't portrayed that way. I think it was because a lot of people would come in and would kind of use it as a stepping stone, and we would say, no, this isn't a stepping stone. This is a career right here. This is very much a career, and something that you can do. So being on that committee and everything, how important is it to be able to kind of take not only the lead on that with, of course, the rest of the group that is part of this committee, but to make it so that folks stay, because places have been short staffed forever. And I think, that is probably one of the best places to start, is to show people this is where you want to be and to stay. And maybe we can, curb the short staffing problem.
Yeah, absolutely. So some of our main goals are kind of attracting young professionals to the profession, and then also making it a career, not just a job, showing the impact that we can make and all the opportunities that you have as a young professional in the opportunity. But also we're focusing on giving resources to PSAPs about recruiting and retaining young professionals, and what they can do to kind of keep those people on board and keep those people engaged, and kind of get their input on things that are happening in the PSAP and in the 911 industry in general. Uh, Another thing that we do is at the APCO National Conference, normally we do a young professionals mixer to start having young professionals establish that network of people across the country that they can connect with. And then also, on most years, we do a service project to help the community that is affected, or that our conference is in, in some way so we can have an impact in that way. So we leave kind of our fingerprints and footprint on the community that we're having the conference in, because we feel like that's important. And I feel like that's very important to my generation and the millennial generation, because we want to see how 911 makes a difference, and we want to know how we as a generation can really make a difference in the world. And I think 911 has a great opportunity to do that, because each and every day we do make a difference. So I think it's a good career to have, and I think it's a good way to kind of present it to young professionals in that way.
You know, I'm right there with you. I agree fully, because there's a lot that that come into this, and they don't see it or they don't hear it right away. And so about 5 years ago, actually, the company that I was working for then, we were at the national, I think it was the NINA conference. It was when it was in San Antonio. But we were there, and we were sponsoring the young professionals party that they were doing. And I remember one of them, it was Nina for sure, because now I remember who it was who called me up. But one of the Nina officials called me up, and I said, "What do you need?" And they said, "We want you to say a few words before this starts." I was like, "What?" And they said, "Yeah." I said, "Okay." It was like, "Well, did you guys pick me?" And they're like, turn around, and all my coworkers are there, and they're like, "Yeah, you are the one who are going to say something." I was like, "Damn, okay." So I kind of put myself in the place of when I was first starting out and what it was like for me. And basically what I ended up saying to them was, you know, um, to make sure to network, of course, get out of their cliques, and also like really, really take in everything that they're doing, because not a lot of people get this opportunity. And all those folks there, I told them, you are the next generation of 911 that's coming in. We talk about next generation 911 all the time when it comes to tech, but now we're going to talk about it personally. All of you are that next generation that's coming in. So make sure to take it in and make a change, some sort of change or whatever. And I remember hearing a few people go, "Oh, like it's not what I expected that this person was going to say." Like that was kind of deep. And I wasn't trying to be deep, but it was trying to get people motivated, kind of
Yeah.
like you are, to really understand that what they're doing. Like they're not just there for a job. Like they're doing something very important and impactful. And even if people don't see it, or they don't say it or whatever, just to know that what you're doing is something amazing and something that not a lot of people can do. And again, that's that next generation that's coming in. So I applaud you, man. You and your whole group. I know Valerie's been helping you as well with a lot of stuff. And I think it's going to be good. I'm excited to see where you end up going with this. So
Yeah.
going into the wrap up of this episode, which has been awesome to have you on and learn your story, your background, and so much that you have done and experienced just over these 3 years, and what you're starting as well with the Tenacious Telecommunicator. For those who are also looking at, can I make a change? Can I do something that's impactful to just get started? Like, what advice would you have for some of those folks who are thinking of doing something new, or making a change, trying to make an impact in this profession?
I think the most thing that I have to say to those people is just never give up. You may not, it may not be easy, and it's obviously going to take a lot of work, but just never give up. You're not going to have everything go your way the first time. So you just never have to give up, and just keep pursuing those dreams and everything that you have going for you. And obviously you have a huge network of people that you can go to. So make sure you start out going to these conferences or connecting with people on LinkedIn or virtually in some way, and just start establishing those connections, because when you kind of hit a bump or something like that, you'll have that strong network of people to be able to be your hype man and just keep on giving you advice and just being like, you got this. So just never give up and just keep on going.
Awesome. Perfect. Again, Toby, thank you so very much for being on. And for those who are looking for more information on everything that you're doing, how can they find you? Whether it be email, website, social media, how can they find you?
So you can join our Facebook group, the Tenacious Telecommunicator. We also have a public-facing page that we share some things on. That way you can also share them. It's also called the Tenacious Telecommunicator. So when you go to the public page, it will also ask if you want to join the group, so you can do it that way. We also have a website, thetenacioustelecommunicator.com, and then you can contact us with the contact box below, or email us at thetenacioustelly, TELE, @gmail.com.
Awesome. Excellent. Again, thank you so very much for being on, sharing your story, but also sharing what you're doing with this awesome project. So thank you so much for being on.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
I will be right back here with you in just one moment. And for those who are watching and listening, if you have any comments, questions, or you want to be a guest on the show, you can email us, and that's going to be wttpodcast@gmail.com. Once again, that is wttpodcast@gmail.com. You can follow us on Twitter. That is @91podcast. You can like us on Facebook. That is facebook.com/Within the Trenches Podcast. This episode has been sponsored by InDigital Rapid Deploy as well as Car Buying. Big shout out, as always, to patrons for everything. There are perks for patrons only, tons of them. But these specifically, these two, are audio versions of the DRT as well as Open Mic Live. So make sure to check that out. If you want to become a patron and support us, you can check us out. That is patreon.com/WTT Podcast. This can be seen on Facebook as well as YouTube and Twitter. And then you can listen 24/7 on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, your favorite podcasting app, and withinthetrenches.net. Have a good one, everyone, and we will see you in the next one.